afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Kylie Bryant. I'm New Zealand Country Manager of Bravura Solutions. We provide insurance and wealth platforms to a number of large financial institutions in New Zealand. So I'd like to welcome you to one of the most interesting sessions we have had at the FSC over the last couple of days. So our focus is on emerging tech, Web3, AI, and what is on everyone's top of mind, cybersecurity and resilience challenges facing the financial services industry. We've heard over the last few days that we are living in unprecedented times. COVID has accelerated our digital transformation, and this emerging tech that we'll discuss today will talk about some of the opportunities and the challenges that we're encountering. So I would like to welcome our two panellists today. On my far right, I have Craig Maskell, PwC Cyber Consulting Partner. Craig is a cyber leader with a comprehensive experience in architecting and delivering cyber capabilities for over 20 years. Craig is motivated to help New Zealand businesses understand their cyber risk and develop strategies to help them execute on capabilities that are relevant and aligned to their business objectives. Prior to PwC, Craig has worked in information securities at some of the largest global technology organisations, including IBM, T-Systems and Vodafone. Welcome, Craig. And next, on my right, we have Akash Mittal, Trustees Executive Chief Transformation Officer. Akash has recently joined Trustees and has over 15 years' experience in IT operations, digital transformations, with responsibility for managing IT infrastructure, cybersecurity, software enhancement, and process optimisation. He's worked in various positions across the Australian financial services, with over 10 years in the wealth management sector. Akash acts as technology and cybersecurity advisor to executive management and boards, and he is also on the director of the National Board of Australia Information Security Association and is busy organising this next conference coming up soon. So what I'll do, Craig, I'll hand over to you first, just to give you an intro and understand a little bit more.
Yep, it's working. Yeah, thanks very much for coming along to this event. We were thinking the second day after lunch was going to be a bit dusty, but I appreciate the turnout. So yeah, look, I'm running the practice now for a couple of years, and I've been working with PwC for about 8-9 years, and it's really taking my operational background into helping the business side of cyber, and we have about 35 people, and we run actual cyber operations and all the way up through to strategy, risk, and governance, and provide vCISO support. So really providing that full spectrum has enabled us to really start to understand the pain points of organisations, but also find, a relevant path forward, right-sizing cyber and demystifying cyber. So you talk to a lot of people and they go, cyber, it's a big thing, too hard to handle. But when you actually just talk about the resilience of their critical business services, you talk about availability, confidentiality and integrity. And it starts, making more meaning to the people who are trying to run their businesses. And so it's still a journey we're on, and I think enabling organisations to understand how to keep their critical systems up, how to recover in an event, but also how to manage their customer reputation along the way is really, really key now, as we've seen with some of the more prevalent ransomware events now hitting New Zealand. It's about how do we actually respond, how do we care for our customer information, is really key in giving them confidence in your services, but your ability to maintain operations. That's a bit about me in the last few years.
Brilliant. Akash, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the extensive introduction, Carly. I don't think so I've got anything else to add to that. But look, I've recently joined the Trustee Executives Wealth Management business here in New Zealand. My background has been IT transformation and cybersecurity for the last 15 years, as Carly mentioned. Contrary to Mark, my role is more, enabling the business internally and solving, the challenges in terms of cybersecurity and providing services to our clients and, protecting what is important for them. Look, as again Carly mentioned, I also volunteer for an organisation called Australian Information Cybersecurity. We're the peak body for cybersecurity in Australia. There's a cyber conference, the National Cyber Conference that's coming up in October, which Carly was referring to, which we're quite busy organising at the moment. Yep, thank you.
Brilliant. I thought we might start with just some basic definitions. These words are bandied around, but they mean different things to different people. So Akash, I might start with you. How would you define Web3 in layman's terms?
Okay. I think probably the best way to explain is maybe provide a little bit of a comparison between what we have used to have in the past, what we have today, and what Web3 is going to look like. So Web 1 was all about the read, where we used to consume the information from the web. We read information, and that was Web 1. Web 2, which we use currently, is a little bit of more interactive, where we do read and write. Web 3 is where we're going to execute as well. So not just read and write information, but we'll be able to execute. I think the another aspect to highlight is, at the moment, we can almost say that the information available on the web on the internet is supplied by the big data aggregators in the world. Mostly your Googles, your Facebook, and so on and so forth. With Web3, there will be a shift in terms of the data decentralization, and it's going to be more in control in terms of individuals than big data aggregators like Google and Facebook. I hope that's simple enough.
Asim. Any questions? No.
Brilliant.
They all got it.
That's a good start.
Or not.
Yeah. And what about AI? What's the definition of AI?
Look, it's again, if I'm explaining it in really layman terms, you can consider it. You can compare it with Excel sheets on steroids. Right? Is probably the layman term, the best layman term I can explain it in terms of how AI should be compared. It's again all the information data that has been harnessed to provide certain outcomes. So it's basically what you feed into a machine to get certain outcomes on the basis of the business logic or the outcomes that you're expecting for the machine to interpret to. Now there are other components to it in terms of self-learning and then learning from data as it sort of provides that service, and improve as an ongoing quality of the service that a system is providing. Again, I'm trying really hard to explain it into layman terms, but I think I'm failing.
No, I think getting to a common understanding before we kick into it is really, really important. Regulation has been a hot topic over the last couple of days in this conference. So in this space, New Zealand is not a highly regulated market, but this is starting to change. Can you help us understand a little bit about that, Craig?
Yeah, sure. So I guess when you compare ourselves to Europe and Australia, the US, and you think about a couple of years ago, regulation was one of their biggest threats to business because they get over-regulated in all their areas about meeting expectations, compliance, just to stay in business, and that cost to operate can be quite significant. In Australia, probably 3 or 4 years ago, more regulations come through, not just in the finance sector, but now the energy sector, on setting a level, a common bar of acceptable services. And how that's protected, and giving the consumers and customers confidence that every organisation that is under this regulation is meeting a minimum bar to protect their information, but also maintain critical infrastructure and things like that, which are quite important. So New Zealand is a little bit behind the 8 ball. Again, we are building confidence in that space. RBNZ setting some guidance around resilience and expectations across the finance sector. A lot of all of the retail banks parented out of Australia having to apply to APRA and provide yearly results, which is to the regulator in Australia. There's also BS11 coming through, which is a regulator compliance requirement to be able to stay in business in New Zealand. So we're starting to see that drop down to the smaller organisations. I'm sure many of you know about IFERS and how some of the direction that's heading is starting to set a precedence where how can we give our consumers confidence that we're protecting their information, but also how can we give them confidence that in an event which might require people to call their insurers, are our systems going to be available to be able to service our customers? And those expectations are going to start to, we're going to have to lean in to that expectation to go, well, how do we actually demonstrate that? Now, that's by applying a consistent framework that's used in a lot of other territories to start measuring where you are at in comparison to many others.
Akash, have you got anything to add to that in your experience?
No, look, I think Craig summarised it really well. I think we've seen the similar thing in Australia as well, where we were lagging behind and we're now playing catch up. And I think same thing is happening over here in New Zealand as well. Look, definitely, I think it's the risk appetite towards cybersecurity, in particular, I think is increasing within the the markets, in Australia and New Zealand. I think since after the COVID, the digital transformation has definitely ramped up, and I think that has ramped up the risks of having digital services and being impacted by cybersecurity and the risk associated with it. I think we've all seen the globally the state actor threats from different parts of the world. I think countries like Australia and New Zealand they also have this non-state threat actor playing a big part, and I think that's quite bit of a concern in terms of what happens here when you have a lot more reliance on digital services, when your critical infrastructure, when your day-to-day finances are quite tightly tied into how you have access to those things through digital platforms. And I think that's why I think it's becoming a topic for regulators to get involved and highlight the value of being cyber resilient. I think Craig made a point in terms of being a roadblock, and I think that's what we need to be cautious of in terms of how much we introduce the regulations in terms of this. Regulations are important because it increases awareness and it creates the conversation at the exec level and the board level. Once that happens, people talk about those risks as being issues. There's heightened sense of accountability. I remember in my experience, in the past where I have asked for upgrading the firewalls and I was told that we're not a bank. To the point where now, constantly we get asked by the board how cyber resilient we are, what are we doing, are we doing enough, how prepared we are in a situation where something goes wrong. So I think that's a good way of regulators getting involved. But I think in my view, it also needs to be quite collaborative with the businesses, with the industry, rather than just being driven out from a perspective of, you got to do this, you got to protect, the interest of the wider community. I think there needs to be a collaborative approach to not stop businesses from doing their business, but having enough safe, guardrails to, continue doing the business, but providing the services in a safe way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and it's a really good point around now reporting to the board and then becoming, the governance over that. And, where compliance starts to, influence the board is actually when they're consistently seeing it across a number of their organisations that they may be on the board with. And it's actually how do you, that consistency of using like a NIST or an ISO or an NZISM framework, depending on the organisation, across the sector, is really important so that there is a single channel of reporting. What we found from the retail banking side where they had APRA, NIST, BS11, SWIFT, and so some of the work we've done over the last few years has actually enabled them to consolidate a single outcome of compliance where it's met across 3 or 4 audiences. And I think that's the opportunity for the financial sector is to start leaning in on, okay, well, if we're going to report to the board, how do we do that consistently? How do we, even your customers report to you based on their due diligence? Are we been doing enough to actually protect our business as part of protecting cyber assurance and what that means? And so, again, it's leaning in now to enable consistency across the sector is really important because you want the business to actually operate and run the business. So how can we simplify together across all the organisations and even on our side of the sector in executing and enabling, your service providers to be measured by the same metrics that you report to your board, which you receive from your clients. That will just simplify that landscape significantly, and that's where we're starting to work with some of the smaller insurers or finance areas where they've taken a couple of frameworks and go, this is what we expect of our clients, this is how we're going to apply it. So when we report to our board, we have consistency in language. It enables that awareness to permeate through much faster than having 3 or 4 standards. And so, yeah, compliance is going to be really important for that consistency.
Yeah, I think consistency is absolutely top of mind, and from my perspective and our board's perspective and our clients, cybersecurity and resilience is a super hot topic. Intelligence agencies say that anti-malware systems has tripped up more than 169,000 threats to New Zealand since the middle of last year. Obviously, in the last couple of years, we've seen the NZX and the RBNZ attacks as front of mind. So has that really driven the compliance and the regulation and the top of mind for business and boards?
Yeah, definitely. I think in New Zealand now there's a directive through the Institute of Directors that the due diligence of every organisation is now on the board and governing that. And so what that signal is now is not just a one-liner in an audit committee report. It's actually helping them understand where is our risk and are we managing it effectively. I guess the landscape is broad. You're not going to be able to stop every type of attack, but it's just showing that you've actually got a path to, protecting your critical services. And yeah, I think it's not going away. I think, there's been some really big examples and what that mean. I mean, so one of our services is we provide global threat intel to our operations, but also a number of clients. And we're seeing in the past probably 3 or 4 years what used to take 2 or 3 weeks to maybe get here, which we used to see in Europe. Our teams in Europe would report a vulnerability from our threat intel. Literally 12 hours later, we're seeing it's knocking on some of our clients' doors. So I think that the change in that dynamic means New Zealand is on the map, and they're not holding back and coming and knocking on our door. Even though we're a small market, the financial rewards is probably much less than what they get out of the US. But I think what they're finding is there's a lack of consistency due to the lack of regulation and compliance that many organisations don't do the fundamentals. So yeah, it's a big influence.
Yeah, I'm actually involved in my day job in the electricity industry. I know we've been looking at bringing some of those sort of standards in our industry and distribution industry. And one of the concerns is obviously when you're providing information on where you're at as far as these things, that you keep that confidential, because clearly if any of this information is out in the public sort of domain, it's just easy picking for someone to say, oh, there's a weak spot there, we'll have a go at that. So I know there's a lot of anonymisation of sort of that sort of information where it's collected, and so that someone can't identify a particular organisation as being a weak point.
Yeah, exactly.
Collaboration is the other thing that we're doing in our industry, is working together to actually try and standardise the way we're actually reporting ourselves, and particularly the NIST and so on, saying we'll have a certain standard we'll try and achieve ourselves, and then help each other to sort of get to a certain level.
Yeah, no, for sure, and that's great to hear. I think the new regulations coming from Australia in the energy sector or critical infrastructure, I think that's the thing that would start to apply in that energy sector as a whole, because it's regulated over there and because of the relationships we have across with Australia again. I think in the next year there's going to be organisations that go, well, you're our child organisation, or you're a direct partner with us. We expect you to align to the same standard and report to us to give us confidence. And what's also driving that is, you guys working together, is that third-party risk, supply chain risk, which has become really prevalent. Is that how do you get confidence in the people that you work with that they're actually protecting your information or your services the way you expect? And again, those frameworks is really important. I've actually got we had an incident last year where an insurer was actually compromised, and they went after their client policies on who would pay the most ransomware. And so they didn't do anything else to the insurer. They just sat there and just took, it was like a shopping list. Who should we hit first? And then we go down to the ones who are paying less. they knew what the insurers would pay out at a minimum. They just went in with that, so there's no, speed of execution or payment. And, that's the sort of the smarts that are coming into these attackers.
Are we seeing different challenges in New Zealand to the global markets, or, is it similar or different?
I think it's similar now. Like I say, though, I think there's a lot of the threats or the vulnerabilities people are finding. Many of you might be aware of the Log4j incident, which put a lot of organisations really focused on fixing that. Is a great example of where that global impact is actually influencing us. A lot of our clients have customers overseas as part of our export relationships. We're seeing a lot of them starting to set expectations on those organisations to apply NIST frameworks or ISO, report into those, because we're an export country, they're getting hit going, well, we need to have confidence. And so that's actually starting to influence a lot of the smaller organisations. And, they're trying to grapple with where they need to show and invest their money over the next few years.
Cyber insurance, a very hot topic at the moment. What's your views on that?
Again, I think it's become a topic in a way. Organizations, understand the value of cyber insurance. I think the challenge is that it's not being explained or understood at the level where it should be. I think businesses overly rely on cyber insurances at times, hoping that this is your exit strategy in a situation where a data breach or a cybersecurity incident does happen. But the reality is that it's much more complex topic than what it seems like at the surface. And I think there's a general awareness missing at the moment in terms of the businesses knowing and understanding it. There was a recent court case in Australia, a car parts company called Insurer, and they sued Chubb Insurance because they had a data breach, and they were not completely covered for all the losses. And it's a very interesting court case, and the papers are actually available online, where they have gone through the details of what's covered and what's not covered. And I think that's a bit of an eye-opener for businesses when they go in a situation and they go, I've got cyber insurance, I'll make a call, and one, it will be looked after, plus all the losses that I'm making through this will be covered for that. But in reality, that's very different. I think the terms and conditions, Mark and I, Craig and I, we were having a conversation just before about the terms and conditions and what that means. Any insurance policies that we have, even in our personal life, the car insurance and the house insurance. I think that needs to be much more well understood by businesses, as in what will be covered, what situation or what role my cyber insurance company will play. And before I hand it over to you, Craig, one thing that I do want to say is that we have seen instances where in a breach or in a cybersecurity incident, cyber insurance companies have played a shadow board role, where they've come on board and, they've tried to resolve the situation, but it's almost become like a shadow board. And what do you need to do in that situation? What are the responsibilities that you hand over to them, and you still, run your business in terms of what you need to do? The another thing I'll add to that point is, we sometimes overly rely on, technology when it comes to that situation. I think businesses also need to understand what is it that they can do in scenarios where there's a breach or a cyber incident where a particular system is not available, and how they can continue the path of their critical business activities in that situation. And I think it's quite a broad conversation in terms of just cyber insurance and what considerations and information a business should consider when going through that journey. I'm sure a lot of people over here have received Excel sheets or questionnaires with hundreds of questions from their providers, their cyber insurance providers, and most of the times you go, oh, I don't know what this is. And then you get caught when you actually want to use that service. So I think that's another thing. And again, I'm sure Craig and I had a chat about it. There's a lot of work that you guys are doing in terms of that. So
yeah, thanks. This thing. So just understanding the cyber requirements, from strategy through to execution, we go into clients and they give us their policies to unpick and go, okay, what are they covering and what are they not? Because as part of our, some of the services we provide is incident response and even crisis simulations, and that's actually what is the role of the insurer? When do you escalate to them? And then what is their role once that you're in during an actual incident? Because many insurers will actually have additional arms that will have negotiators, they'll have third parties who do containment and some sort of forensics and things like that. And so, helping clients demystify what is in there, what is covered, what do they need to cover, and how do they actually practice that and test that with the insurers, but not just the insurers, but their service providers, their business partners, and their teams on the ground. What does that mean, in a crisis? And so that that role is really important for insurers.
Yeah, the other issue I've found is that there's so many exclusions to actually getting cover in the first place. And I think that's one thing you've got to look at quite closely is if you haven't got certain controls in place,
Yeah.
you're actually wasting your time for starters.
Yeah, this is the due diligence. I think, if you're going to get measured by the board by NIST, can you provide that same report to the insurer to go, instead of us having another questionnaire, can we get consistency in that? Because you're right, it's like, well, if we've got a gap and if it actually affects our ability to get insurance, then that's got to be prioritised in our strategy. Similar to, if there's a gap on one of your critical applications that, if this goes down, we don't have resilience, but this is our revenue earner for, which gives us 30 grand a day or whatever the criticality of it, that prioritises your investments. Just like compliance, if you're not going to be compliant or meet a regulatory requirement and you could be taken out of business, that's your priority. So again, it's not just the cyber. If you go back to the confidentiality, availability and integrity of your systems, it's actually not just the cyber thing, it's actually staying in business and meeting the expectations of your customers and regulatories.
Cyber insurance is basically the payments at the bottom, but it's not.
Yeah.
Controls at the top.
Yeah, and I remember when they first come out, they were really high level. Yep, we'll cover you for this under these circumstances. But over time, it's morphed into, well, hang on, you need to be at least trying to protect your information. And what that's turned out is the same thing as, that reporting line is that, we can't be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff if you haven't actually, changed your tyres in 20 years.
And what role is PwC playing in upskilling the boards and executives of our New Zealand companies?
It's gone off a tree. Yeah, quite a bit. So look, we do go to boards. We present as boards. We're board advisors. You don't need a cyber person, information security person on the board full time. However, there's really a role in enabling the board to understand how to govern the business and doing the right thing around their risk, around their investments. Is it in the right place? All too often, we've seen like lots of green coming through. The report saying, it's all good here, but if you actually look at the ground, there's definitely a few reds and oranges. But at the board level, they don't know the detail in their operations and understanding of where their gaps may be and why. And so absolutely we're working with a number of boards and even the board training groups such as Co-op Mayfield and TSC and stuff, and it's about enabling them to identify what is crucial. And that's why I come back to the confidentiality, integrity and availability, because that resonates with board members, not the word cyber. And then it enables them to start asking the right questions. How do you prove to me that we've invested $200,000, are we more protected? Are we going to recover better? It's, ask the question and get them to demonstrate is really key. So it's definitely a growing role that we're seeing and helping our clients.
Brilliant. We're going to change gears shortly, but do we have any questions on cyber security or cyber resilience before we change gears into Web3 and AI?
So just looking it up, what happened in that court case, Akash?
Say that again.
What happened in the court case? Just looking it up.
Yeah, so Chubb Insurance actually won the case because the policy stated that they will only cover for the direct losses. So, and that's why it's a very interesting case, because it highlights how many other kinds of insurances you need to be probably looking into to protect your business, to a degree by, you don't incur losses or cost from other domino effect of a cybersecurity breach.
Brilliant. So we will change gears into Web3 and AI. So Web3 is one of the most critical technologies currently in development, however, not always easy to understand, like many advanced technologies. So how are we meeting the challenges for the financial services industry with the adoption of technologies such as Web3 and AI? I'll start with you, Akash.
Definitely, I think that's it is something which is driven out of the demands of the market. I don't think so, particularly here in Australia and New Zealand. I don't think so. Much of the organisations are actually prepared or even have these things on their strategies at this stage. Or roadmaps, to be able to investigating or delivering services through those channels. But look, I think definitely there's going to be a push, in terms of how the consumer market is changing and the demands are changing from, the new age, clients and customers. They definitely are going to push in that direction and going to look for options. And I think, particularly in the financial services sector, I think there's, through the intergenerational transfer of wealth, I think we're also seeing that, the millennials are more happy to self-manage the money. But they need the information, they need the tools and the apps, they need the data to be readily available, in real time. And I think it's going to drive the requirements, and it's going to drive the businesses to go more towards investigating into how they can leverage Web3 and AI and so on and so forth. I guess the another challenge there is that in the absence of the businesses catching up, I think the big organizations are going to push down certain services and products into the market, which will then become I think a challenge for businesses in Australia and New Zealand to provide those services or compete in those changing markets.
Yeah, thanks. So, I guess for us, we haven't worked with a lot of clients in the space. As Akash mentioned, there's not many New Zealand organisations adopting it and having to understand it. But if you look at the use cases today, it's really, like Nike, Gucci, all these sort of luxury brands who are sort of going on the bandwagon, where they're providing a digital sort of blockchain for each purse, so that they know it's an actual Gucci purse, or they know they're an actual Nike. The risk is actually really low. It's just an identified as like a serial number against the shoe. Right through to the digital assets such as some of the ridiculous cartoon pictures that are going for millions of dollars, but which are quite diverse. And the protection of the high-use Nike asset tagging is not really... The organisations haven't figured out how to monetise out of those scenarios. The digital asset space, where it's a one-off, the protection around it is really high, even though it's decentralised and the person who owns it actually owns that. But the real challenge we're seeing, and I don't want to be the pessimist in the room, but I work in cyber. But if you look at blockchain, cryptocurrency, which has been around a while, there's been a number of breaches, and it's actually not the blockchain that's being breached. It's the services and the infrastructure around it. And so, again, we're dropping back into the Web2 challenges where, hey, we want to deliver these services, but how do we protect all the elements around it? How do we trust where the cryptocurrency will sit on a bridge, where it actually allows the currency to change between cryptos, and that's been compromised. Someone's changed the destination address on about $180 million worth of crypto because the platform itself had a security flaw. So, that was protected, but all they needed to do was change the destination, which was open I'm getting really technical, open source, but it actually led to $180 million just being wiped off everyone's cryptocurrencies. So as we lean into these new technologies, it's really important to do it with your eyes wide open. What are the threats to this? How can an organisation monetize out of these blockchains, out of decentralised identity? You know, once it's out there, and this is what we've seen for years around cryptocurrency, it can sit in someone's machine and they'll just sit there and try and break it, try and break it. So again, we're really back to the fundamentals of even, Web 1, which is how do I not get my website hacked? It's a lot of the practices and infrastructure around those capabilities.
This is a very naive question. So is Web3 is more robust and secure than Web 2? Is that what it is? So if you built that on, if they had that surrounding infrastructure built on Web 3, would it have made any difference?
No. So it's all, I guess, it's all in the practices around it, because it's all reliant on a developer still. It's all reliant on the practices of private key, public key. If your private key is stolen, such as when you go to a website, 10 years ago it used to always be HTTP, like open source, anyone could intercept it. We moved to secure, then VeriSign was hacked and everyone had to go and get certificates for somewhere else. It's the same practice, it's the same hygiene around, we need to provide a service, but how do we actually protect that information once it's gone? Because again, we're moving from you come to our website, you interact with it, it's still within your realms, even though it might be AWS or Google, but once that block is out there, you don't know where it goes, who's got access, who makes copies of it. And so the security is even more paramount, even though they purport that it is a much more secure way because you're not handing over all your information every time. The challenge is the operations of it, the trust you've got in your developers to not put in insecure code, and to be honest, they still haven't got that right for Web 2. So we're moving into a new venture where you go, hey, well, let's get the basics right here, and it's going to happen. It's just that when you do it and when you look at adopting it, just ask the really pertinent questions. Sorry.
No. So the problems are developers.
In a nutshell. No, but the thing is, it's on us as a community to actually enable them. What we're doing is working in universities. We actually have ComSci students come to and work within PwC for their last year and actually help, in our security operations centres. They do threat hunting on client sites, they do debugging, source coding. We actually enable them on real world exercises so that when they come out, they're not developers who just go and build something that works. They actually understand how things can be broken. They're actually way more enabled. And that's because we saw the gap in the university style of all the theory. They don't actually enable them to learn what are secure practices. How do we actually do this in line? And so, yes, there is the developers because they've got a really important job of enabling automation, enabling interactions, user experiences. How do we make it smooth? It's not just the transitions, but it's how do we protect that information and make sure the services are resilient.
Yeah, look, I think that's a very good point, and I think for me, I think it's about the awareness. I think it's not it's not about just the developers, but I think it's everyone. Even the consumers need to be aware in terms of the services they're using and how they're using it, how they're sharing the information, why they're sharing the information. I think it's asking the right questions, as you rightly said about the boards. But I think that asking the right questions is across the board. I think. Any technology, anything that is digitally enabled, I think needs to be protected. And I think it's not only the responsibilities of developers or organizations or governments or regulators. I think in my perspective, I think there's three pillars to it. I think you've got your regulators, governments, you've got your consumers, and you've got your companies, organizations, and I think they all three need to come together to be able to have a digital place where things are, within the guardrails of, being protected overall. I think at the moment it's one of the three running faster than the other two. And at the moment it's the industries, who are running faster than the regulators and the users, and they're always playing catch up and, trying to find out things only after the fact when something goes wrong. Again, I'm sure you all must have read about the recent TikTok, the story, where a company in Australia called Internet 2.0, they actually decoded the source code for TikTok to understand what information they're capturing, what they're doing. In their privacy policy, they quite clearly, have detailed that the data that they collect, why they collect it, and it doesn't go to, China. But when this company look at the source code, they actually identified that it does go to China, and they've challenged them. I was reading this, the article in the newspaper, and basically there was a comment made about, the users should be aware and they should know what they're doing and what they're consuming. The problem is that if they don't know what information is being collected and where it's being shared, users can't really do much. So, sorry, I sort of deviated a little bit, but basically I think those three pillars need to be in sync, work together. The industries, the government regulators and users to a degree to come up with solutions, because the reality is that anything that we do digitally, there is a risk associated, whether it's Web 2 or Web 3. I think that's never going to go. But the demand's changing, the markets are changing, the products are changing, the why the people want to consume these services are changing. Again, COVID changed the why people, they're now used to some of these services. Everyone saw, how all of a sudden the wet signatures were not required and they can digitally sign things, and how a lot of services which were face to face are now online, available online. So I think it's making the digital landscape more safe, collaboratively, with full openness of the purpose. Again, creating the enough guardrails around protecting the data, the individual sovereignties to a degree.
We'll have a number of people in this room starting to either pilot or adopt some of these Web3 and AI technologies. What advice do we have people in the room that's starting to move into these emerging tech? Yep, I can see some nodding down the back there. So what advice and guidance should we be taking on board when moving into this new tech?
I think it's just, again, probably the pessimistic view is, what are the threats? What is going to impact? How do we ensure it's stable? How do we give confidence to people to step into that and trust, your Web3 environment? And I guess only invest from a security perspective based on the information and the criticality of those services. One of our, challenges is helping organisations not overinvest. And so if it is a cool tool that's really interactive for customers to use, and there's low risk of information and criticality to it, absolutely, I think it's a great way to engage. You look at the AI chatbots that come through now, some of them are pretty clunky, but then some of them are really intuitive, and that's just the data points starting to enable a real-life interaction. And so, absolutely, we need to be harnessing that capability to reduce, the need for more people on call centres and things like that. And so, I think just go in and ask the questions, what are the threats? What if this goes down? If it's really important, what are we doing to ensure it's resilient, that we don't lose the service and things like that? Just ask those hard questions.
Yeah, look, I think absolutely agree with you. I think the another angle to this is it should be driven by the consumer needs. I think that one of the problems I think we're seeing in the world today is that most of these are actually driven by the data aggregators more so than the requirements and the needs of the consumers. And I think when you're designing those solutions and when you're bringing in these technologies, think about the benefit of the customers and not in terms of the information and the data that you're going to collect and use it. And I think that. That the motives and the purpose needs to be right with the, again, the threat analysis and, how those services are going to be provided back in a safer way. Sorry, I lost my chain of thought. I was about to say something.
Well, Stephen, just to add to that, it's really with any service that you adopt now, even if it's cloud services and getting the sprawl of, we talked about before, everything going on into the cloud, the spread of information and access to it, it's really understanding the total cost of operation. What many organisations do is they go, yep, this is awesome, it's going to cost us 500K to deploy and run. But what they find is actually, going into the total cost of operations, running the cyber stuff, just the, compliance stuff, but not even just that, it's just maintaining the platform is not really understood. And what happens is it erodes really quickly over time because the business doesn't have the money to operationally fund that year on year. And that's where the biggest security risks occur. Things aren't patched. People aren't hired to do the right jobs. And I think that total cost of operation is missed in so many business cases. It's really important if you're going out doing anything new, even onboarding new services in the cloud, for just even basic stuff, just understand, we did a review of an organisation that had 4 new cloud services to provide specific functions, business processes within the organisation. They weren't connected to their, central identity store, and so they were onboarding a whole bunch of people. In the first run in the project, yep, they went live. It's all good. After about 6 months, 25% of the people had actually moved on or didn't need access to those systems, so they're paying subscription fees for all those accounts. And so it's not just a cyber thing, it's just actually cost of operations, which was really missed. And, so by doing a 50K review, we saved them nearly 250K, and who knows how long that would have gone on for before they actually did an audit of each of those systems to determine that. And that's the hygiene that we really need to understand going into running a new service, is what is it going to cost to maintain that, to manage operational cost.
Thank you. Did it come back to you, Akash?
No, yeah, look, I think it was actually along the same lines in terms of the implementation of AIs and stuff. And what I wanted to say was, stick to the basics. Cybersecurity sometimes can be explained quite in a very complex way. But if you really go in terms of the basics, and if you get the basics right, then I think you will find out that most of the threats and most of the risk associated with digital technology can be avoided by just following the hygiene practices. Pick up any of the recent data breaches or cybersecurity incidents, and you'll find out there was a missing patch, or there was a password file that was available in plain text somewhere, or the admin password was admin password. So a good 90% of that is actually hygiene. And when you are investing in technologies like Web3 and AI, I think stick to those basics. Again, one of the comments that Craig made in terms of the encryption keys. It's a basic mathematical, 2 primary numbers give you the encryption key. So if you have that one number available, it's easy to decode. So, things like that is what, I think the businesses who are, taking on to the journey of, some of these technologies should consider, rather than, going into too much complex, reviews or protection mechanisms in place.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's Uber's currently under an incident in the US. Was that what you're referring to? Yeah, someone's through social engineering gave her their credentials, and now they've found the admin password on a clear text file on their machine. Uber's been popped, and you just go, and that's really doesn't matter how much money you throw at all the tools. That's a really it's back to the awareness of all your employees as well as your customers.
Brilliant. Have we got any questions from the floor?
I've got one just to follow on from your comment, Craig. So there is research that indicates that the biggest weakness to the security link is the human, the staff members and their passwords and their own security practices.
Yep.
Have you got any thoughts on how we can kind of fill that gap, aside from going to 20 character length passwords that change every week?
Yeah. Well, you don't like that. I went to the park today. No, look, I think it is a real challenge for organisations. What is becoming really common and integrated is MFA. So it's not just password, it's actually reliant on, because most organisations now will have soft tokens, whether it's Microsoft or Google authenticators or, RSAs or some of the other providers. So you don't have to remember the passwords, but you have to have your phone, to get in. Other organisations, you endorse a password manager, and you provide the right training for everyone in the organisation to use it. Because I use one personally. I don't know who else does, but some of them are really intuitive. You go to a website, it's like, cool, we'll just have my fingerprint, or get it to double check, depending on what it is. Although if someone steals your phone, then they've they knock you out and use your thumb, but less likely. But those are the sort of so password safes and MFA, anything that's integrated with AD, and I just make an assumption that most people have an AD environment for now, not Linux or Novell anymore. Showing my age. Is they have MFA, it's integrated, it's available. So it's how you leverage that is one of the key opportunities.
We've just got another question on a comment you made around artificial intelligence and the threats around AI. So I've seen Terminator, and I know how bad it can get. Have you got any examples of the sort of things that we should be thinking about with regards to AI? Like, is it kind of keeping a lid on how sophisticated they get or sentient they can become? With the direction there.
Yeah, I don't know if it was an urban myth, but I actually heard, and it was probably from someone in Google in New York we were talking to, and he said they had to shut down the link between a couple of their data lakes because of the AI and data matching and interpretation. It started building its own algorithms to build more common patterns, and started, when they said, really? And so it's starting to learn how to build its own pattern recognition to grow the library of, what does that mean? Well, that means because of the behaviour of it. It was really, I was like, really? And they're like, well, I didn't say that. But they had to shut the link down between the systems because of that ability to self-learn. I mean, that's leading edge, and I don't know if it's from a sci-fi movie, but it's absolutely, the ability is there. When you got access and you understand data points, and you start to build patterns of connections between them and sentences and, whatever the inputs are, absolutely, it's going to build its own patterns. And if you look at the trading companies, organisations where they actually read newspapers and build, enable people to make investment decisions based on data points. And that's really the AI stuff going out and providing, well, we've seen these articles across 15 websites. This is the language. There's a lot of positive spin across a lot of investors. So therefore, we think that's a goer. And it's starting to build those rules. So that's where you're starting to, whether it goes on, we have to put in rules, don't harm humans, and iRobot starts to become a thing, who knows, what was it, Demolition Man, and they had self-driving cars, in the 80s, 90s, they have them now.
Now, I just wanted to, back to your first question, Tim, about, the passwords. Couple of things. One, NIST has changed that, and if you have MFI, you don't have to change your password for 12 months now or something. They've 180 days, something like that. So there you go. The another thing I will say is that, look, I think it all comes down to awareness. I think you cannot really ever take out the human element out of the sequence of, a cybersecurity incident. And I think that's very important. I think at the moment it's not front of mind for people where they think cybersecurity is technology problem. I think that's the bigger issue. It's a risk. It's a business risk. It must be treated like a business, like any other business risk, and it should be a awareness thing for everyone who works around systems technology or anything, because it's not just the passwords. It's anything and everything that through the mistakes or oversight could lead into a big cybersecurity incident or data breach. So I think that's the thing, and I think that's where organizations should constantly, I think, evolve in terms of making cybersecurity as a risk factor into job profiles for people to go, look, it is important. It directly affects what you do or what you not do. It directly affects the organization, and I think that's probably is going, because look, the reality is that MFI is already broken. There are ways, you can do SIM cloning and all that sort of stuff, and it's broken if they have your credentials easy. Again, TikTok, the in-app web can capture key logging. It can, capture your passwords that you store. So it's the risks are all across. I think it comes down to the awareness. How much aware you are in terms of the job you're doing, and you identify the risks and call them out and go, look, this is potentially could be a risk, and how do I need to sort of overcome that.
Yeah, and just to add, I guess on the theme of well-being, is what we're, as part of our response plans, we work with clients is actually the human element, the person who actually opened the email or gave away their passwords. When they cause such a catastrophic event, it's actually how do you help them through the situation, because what they very quickly come under fire from their peers in a lot of the areas of the business. So as part of that planning, it's actually going, well, everyone does it. It's how do we actually protect that person through that incident? So we actually have a path, where we're going into the response is actually like, what about this person, where they're at, who's going to, look after them, because it is that human element, and it's really stressful, not just for the teams responding, but the person who may have actually caused the event.
We've probably got time for one more question. Have we got another question from the audience?
I'm just curious about how quantum computing plays into all of this. There was a big theme in the papers a couple of months ago, last year or something, that quantum computing is a big risk for businesses, but also a great opportunity. So what are your thoughts on that with cybersecurity risk?
Just so everyone can hear, quantum computing, big risk or opportunity?
Look, I think like any other thing, I think it's both. It is definitely a massive opportunity, but at the same time, yes, it is a risk. Again, continuing on the theme of crypto and blockchain and all that sort of stuff. One thing that I would like to understand at some point is if it takes X amount of power and days to create the blockchain today to sort of decode, how much time it will take to reverse engineer those passwords with quantum computing, because all of a sudden you have a lot more compute available to reverse engineer that blockchain. So I think there's definitely risks, but yes, I think there are huge opportunities in terms of increased processing powers and what you can do with it. Look, I think those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and I guess, thanks. I guess just along those lines as evidence, probably 10 years ago, so again, one of the services we do is we crack passwords. We get into an organisation and we time how long it takes to break a password, depending on how complex it is. And so we call our computers the beasts, because they're highly, big CPUs to tune through rainbow tables, like lots of passwords, because basically finding welcome ones, maybe one of the first ones, but then they started putting exclamation marks on for getting really tricky. So it didn't, started to take longer and longer to get through. The quantum computing actually enables a much faster run through of common patterns and keys, which is just a bunch of random numbers, and finds the actual match. And so that expedites that whole process. And the high availability of it gives it access to criminals, not just businesses. One of the other areas is that we saw compromises in the early stages of AWS and Azure in tenancy, where if you were in one tenant, you could actually read the memory of another tenant, because the isolation of the ROM, the threads, was not protected. Again, quantum computing that has much more information passing through it, so therefore that type of risk or exposure of information outside of your control even is really, more present.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, both of you. Just what do we want to leave people in the room with? One takeaway from each of you today, or one piece of advice?
Not been enough. No.
One last thing.
Oh, look, I think. Especially, with the changes in the health sector, they're going to be leaning in more on compliance across the whole health sector, not just ministries, all the organisations, so even in insurance and stuff like that. Again, the requirements around cyber reporting and insurance, it's about leaning in and getting consistency across the whole network with our clients. Pick a framework, work together I don't know if there's a consortium where you can actually go, let's do this as a unit. Use NIST or ISO even as a starting point to provide consistency, not just for your customers, for yourselves, but for board members. So you're actually enabling the whole country and your clients to understand a common set of criteria around cyber. What do you mean?
Look, I think for me, I think the takeaway is, like as I said earlier on, I think treat cyber as a risk to the business. Listen to your CIOs and CISOs, all right? It's, you know... it's important, you know, with the evolution of you know, digital services and the uptake of, you know, digital products and platforms, it will become a crucial part of, you know, decision making going forward. These risks are absolutely, you know, very, very big risks. And, you know, I'm sure, you know, we all have read enough about all the breaches, whether it's Uber or you know, others that have happened recently. And I think that's probably the takeaway is you know, it's a risk, needs to be managed, and you know, just needs to focus like any other issue in the organizations.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the session.